you can't kind of resist anything that's like happening, because there's going to be times where things don't go your way, and you have to face that, and you have to decide whether you want to keep going or not. And you have to set your own boundaries of like, this is what I'm willing to do, this is what I'm not willing to do. But at the same time, it does feel like magic. It's extremely satisfying when something comes to life, and when people are utilizing it, and they're enjoying it, and it's something that didn't exist before. Like, that makes it all worth it.
Welcome to Behind the Work, the show where we focus on all things leveling up, glowing up, and becoming our best selves. I'm your host, Jessica Santana, and I'm bringing you the tips, tricks, and strategies that help us reach our highest potential. So whether you're working at a company, building your business, or you're just trying to level up, this is for you. At Behind the Work, we believe that we all have to go up together, so make sure you're tapped in. Today, we have the honor of sitting down with the very amazing Tanya Menendez. Tanya is the co-founder and CEO of Nearshore, an AI that automates the quoting process for brands and suppliers, making manufacturing faster, smarter, and closer to home. Prior to Nearshore, Tanya co-founded 2 other VC-backed tech companies, including US-based marketplace for factories that she grew from a concept to over 200,000 businesses. Her work at the intersection of technology, manufacturing, and economic development has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, NPR, Fast Company, CNBC, Popular Mechanics, Univision, and Telemundo. She's also one of the few Latina entrepreneurs who has raised over $1 million for each of her companies. Earlier in her career, Tanya had the role of working at places like Goldman Sachs and Google, and she also studied the socioeconomic impact of technology on rural economies at UC San Diego, where her ethnographic research, The Economics of Migration, was published in both English and Spanish by the University of California. So Tanya, welcome to Behind the Work. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm like blushing based on the bio you read. It was really nice to hear from an outsider's perspective almost. So yeah, I'm so happy to be here, and I love the concept of this podcast too, of going behind the scenes and sharing like the real perspective of founders.
Yeah, of course. And Tanya, I really I'm so excited that we're having this conversation today, because I've known you for a while. It's almost like 10 years. And when I think about when we first met, what you were working on, what I was working on, it's just so different. And our relationship has really evolved over the years, and who you've become over the last 10 years has been really beautiful for me to witness. As a Latina, like, there's not a lot of us. There are tons of us that exist. But in terms of like the realms of foundership and entrepreneurship and leadership, we're very far and few between. And I think I've always had a tremendous respect for you and your story and the things that you're building, but also your spirit and what you bring to the world. And, reading that bio was also just like really exciting for me, because I'm just like, oh, we got a baddie today. You know what I'm saying? So what I want to start with, because I don't think that you get bios like that overnight, right? Like these are things that evolve over time. And I want to say that sometimes for us, it starts as we are little, And so if you had to tell the story of little Tanya and where she's from and what her hopes and dreams and aspirations were, how would you describe little Tanya in the world?
Well, I'm getting emotional. I don't think I've ever been asked that question actually on a podcast, which is kind of, gosh, it made me a little emotional. But little Tanya. So I grew up in Hayward, which is a town outside of San Francisco. So I would take BART in high school. I would take BART into the city. That's what we'd say. But I grew up working class. My dad was a factory worker. My mom was a secretary when I was growing up. And I always, they were working a lot, but they really instilled in me this entrepreneurial instinct where, you know, you just have to figure things out on your own. You're just like, you know, like, I don't have time. You have to go figure that out. So even, and then my dad, both of my parents also had interesting stories around, you know, evolving beyond the circumstances that they were born in. So, you know, my dad started off as a factory worker. He was injured and then actually went to trade school and became a network admin. And then my mother, she also started off as a secretary, went back to school later in life. We actually went to college around the same time, got her degree, and then, you know, did a bunch of different things after that. So, you know, they really taught me that you're not defined by the circumstances you're born in. And that, you know, you can imagine a new reality for yourself. And I really appreciated that perspective. So it's funny because when I was growing up, I didn't know that I was like poor or like working class, because you're kind of like, this is just normal life, right? So it's interesting. My teacher, I remember this in like third grade, my teacher was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I think I want to be president. And then she was like, well, I would vote for you, Tanya, which is like really funny to say, right? It's like you know, I'm in third grade. I'm this like Latina working class. Like I'm so grateful she didn't say like, oh, well, that's not possible for you. So I think that, you know, I never really put limits on like what my dreams were. And that was never really my instinct. And like my parents didn't put that on me either. And I really appreciated that. Like sometimes, you know, there's been moments in which they've, you know, when I was at Goldman, they were like, don't leave Goldman, you know, like just like you've already made it. You don't have to do more. And so, you know, there were moments like that. But you know, at the end of the day, I trust my gut and I went with what I wanted at the end of the day and the life that I wanted to create for myself. And you know, in the end, they always supported me. So I always appreciated that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and so much of your story, like, even reminds me of my own. The idea of like having parents that were just like, you got to go figure it out because I don't know how I'm gonna help you, or like the idea of like getting to that corporate job and them saying you don't have to do anything else. I remember when I left to start my own company, I was just like, oh wow, yeah, Dad, I'm doing this, and they were like, why, you know? And so I think, like, you know, so many of our origins start with our families and what our parents fight for. And I imagine that even though they were kind of like, don't leave Goldman, that what you've been able to do over the last so many years, there's things that like they're probably incredibly proud of, because that curiosity and that entrepreneurial spirit that they instilled in you got you to be a 3 times founder, right? Like, you know, your current work with Nearshore is not where you started. You know, you've been entrepreneuring in these streets for a minute now. And I want to talk.
The streets are rough. Let me tell you, the streets are rough.
And I want to talk a little bit about, like, you know, what originally sparked your interest in entrepreneurship specifically, because the reality is that you could have stopped at Goldman, right? And somewhere along the line, you were like, no, like I need to do more. I need to become more. And so tell me about where you were at in your life, because I think based on my research, it was 2012 where you started your first company. And so tell me like where you were at, what made you be like, I gotta go? Because people would stop at Goldman and leave it there. But what made you want to be like, I need more?
Yeah, it was really interesting because you know, I had a good experience at Goldman. They put me on a project. I was working on this automation project with derivatives operations. And so it was really satisfying to see the projects come to life there. But I did feel, you know, there was a moment where I saw that the work product that I was producing was like 2 levels above what I was getting paid. And I brought that up, right? I was like, look, the math isn't mathing here. And they basically said I just had to like wait. And it was a time-based thing, not really a skill-based thing. And I was like, that's not exactly how they said it, but that was what was communicated. And at the same time, I was helping a friend of mine with his business, and he offered me 50% of the business. It was a boyfriend of mine, actually. I don't recommend this, but it's like what happened. It was my journey. And so I was helping him with his business kind of on nights and weekends, just as a friend. And then he offered me 50% of the business to join him. And we had gotten, into Nordstrom at that point. And, through the work, we had set up kind of this D2C model as well. So when that opportunity came, I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to take a bet on myself and I'm going to try this. And if it worst case scenario, I can go back to Goldman. And that's kind of what they said too. They were like, look, people leave all the time. You can come back later. It's fine. And so when they knew I was serious about quitting and they kind of knew, because I was like, during breaks, I had to like get on a sales call or, so we were already generating revenue for this other business. It was a leather goods company. So it was a physical product business. It was my first entryway into entrepreneurship. And honestly, I loved the idea. Like, it was the first time that it was just extremely satisfying to come up with a concept, see it come to life. And then, a few days later, there were like people wearing our bracelets on the subway. And that was like very, very cool to experience. And it felt like magic, you like come up with a concept, it comes to life and like it changes like people's realities a little bit. So, so that was a really exciting. And then as we scaled that business, we got larger orders and the factories that we were working with couldn't handle them. So that's when I was like, we got to find a new factory. I don't want to deal with this. Like, this is really bad quality. And so my partner at the time went and looked for factories, but it was taking him forever. And I was like, it was taking weeks and months. And I was like, what the heck is taking so long to do this? And why is it taking you so long? And then, he explained the process that he was like cold calling using the yellow pages. He was cold emailing. He was going door to door, trying to find these factories. And then I tried to do it myself. And then it was indeed really difficult to find factories. And so that's when I came up with the concept to start my first tech business, which was essentially a marketplace of US factories. And initially the idea was kind of a Yelp for factories close by, to make it really easy to find. And then the idea started to evolve over time. So I started to think about, I had never started a tech business before. This is back in 2012. There was no DEI. This is pre-DEI, pre-girl boss, like pre all of these things. And so there weren't like female, entrepreneurial communities. There weren't Latinas in tech, didn't exist yet. And so, it's interesting because I never really considered that, actually. I never even knew it was a thing to be Latina in tech, because I just wanted to create a tech company. I didn't think it was weird or anything else like that. I just wanted to do it. And so I just started kind of following my curiosity, signing up for email lists, going to events, asking people, meeting people, asking how they did it. And then I found this incubator and I applied for, and we got in. So they gave us $25K just for the concept. And we had to do like a video submission. We got one of our friends to do a mock-up of the design of how it could look. And then we got in, and then, we created the platform, and then everything just started moving really fast after that. So, we got thousands of users really quickly. We grew to 200,000 businesses in about 3 years. And it was just kind of a whirlwind of an experience. And I was also really young. I was like 22 at the time, right? So like I was like not prepared. I was definitely not prepared for any of this. Life came at me really fast. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh crap, I'm like in charge of 30 people. I'm still in this relationship that I was like not really thinking of it in that way. I was only 20 years old, right? When I 21 years old when I met this person. And so so it all just happened really fast. And it was just a whirlwind. So that was like my first tech company. And I ended up leaving because my co-founder and I didn't agree on direction. We ended up also in life and in business. We just didn't agree on a lot of things. And, reflecting back, we just had very different leadership styles. where I and that came out in the end, and and then I decided to keep my peace and just walk away and start fresh. And I moved back to California to start fresh. And the last kind of 7 years for me here has been a little bit of a homecoming, or 8 years now has been a little bit of a homecoming. But yeah, that's how I got started. I know I went on a little bit, but it's kind of a long story. So it's I'm not sure exactly how to shorten it without making it just like the 2-minute version.
Yeah. No, well, you know what, Tanya, I think that well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for sharing, right? Because even providing the audience today with the understanding that there was like also a romantic dynamic to this, right? Like, these things happen to founders. Like, I think people even me, right? Like there is like sides of us that the media isn't going to tell unless we tell it ourselves. And so I want to just say thank you for sharing in that. And I think what I really want to anchor on is that even though this was your first company, you had the courage to leave, right, and say, you know what, while I've left it all on the table here and I've raised millions of dollars and I've grew this to be over 200,000 businesses on the platform, like, this is not where I end. I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to leave and I'm going to go start my second company, right? Which a lot of people, when they do something one time, they think they have to just stick there, right? Especially if it's successful. In the first company you started, it got a lot of really notable investors, a lot of media attention. And so when folks have that level of success, it's hard to walk away. But you were like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to start my second company, which was Snowball Wealth. It was a financial literacy platform that helped thousands pay debt down and begin saving and investing. I remember a few years ago when you launched the platform, reading a little bit about what inspired you to start it. And I was like, oh my God, the level of vulnerability that she's sharing in about how she wants to solve this problem is so beautiful and is so transparent. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about that startup and what problem you were trying to solve and how that was so tied to your own personal identity.
Yeah. And I think I will share a little bit more about like leaving, because I think you're right. It was one of the most difficult decisions I had to make. I had a real community that I had built, and it was extremely painful to leave that and then start over. And I also want to share my thought process around ideating my second business, which I don't often share. I'm an ethnographer at heart. I'm glad you included that in the bio. So
I thought it was so cool. Let me just say, I need to leave this here because this is very cool. But go ahead.
I'm a sociologist, and I really identify with that. And so my process to creating a new company, I like to immerse myself into the problem. So my goal for my second company, I knew I wanted to start a tech company that would help people with economic mobility. And so my first idea was actually to start a blue collar LinkedIn, which or like a LinkedIn for retail or for restaurants and like other kind of jobs that you can get more easily. So I or like start jobs that you're getting starting off. And so I went to work at a Mexican supermarket as a cashier for a few weeks. And yeah.
This is cool.
Undercover. Yeah. And
this is after, guys, and this is after this lady has raised millions of dollars for her first startup. Okay, I had no idea you did this. That is
yeah. I worked as a cashier, and it was really challenging. It was actually one of the hardest jobs I've had to do. They made me mop floors, go get the carts, and so, but the biggest thing I learned there was that when you're working class and like you're like in an hourly wage job, it is just extremely difficult to have time for retraining education. At the end of a workday, all I wanted to do was sit at home and eat chips and watch TV. That's all I wanted to do when I got home, because it was just so physically exhausting that like my brain couldn't actually like retain any information. And that was like really, really helpful perspective for me. And so then I started thinking about what product I wanted to create. And my thought was around, helping first gen college grads, start to save and invest, because my thought was, what I noticed was that a lot of family members are relying on the first gen, the person that's like first generation going to college in their family. So that person, even if, they have a family member that might be working at, I was working at Mi Pueblo here in Hayward. Even if they have like a family member working there, that family member is often relying on that millennial and their, experience, and sometimes even financially, right? So I figured helping the millennial would help the entire family. So that's when I started Snowballed. Essentially, it's a financial literacy app to, understand what you need to do to save and invest. And, I'm really proud of that business, because we really successfully got a lot of people out of debt and started saving and investing, and changed a lot of people's lives. And I felt really, really proud of that. And, but at the end, it was extremely challenging to raise money for a fintech, because fintech at the time was very saturated, and especially consumer business was extremely difficult to raise money for. And I also didn't have, I wasn't a financial planner. I really wasn't as qualified as like other founders, if I'm being honest, to do it, but at least on paper, right? I think that I still could have executed, and I still did execute on things, but I think that for the funding environment, they were looking for certain profiles for that type of venture scale business, and I didn't pattern match with that, and that made it challenging. And we had built it for scale, not for a lifestyle business. So I ended up sunsetting that business last year, and that was also really, really challenging to do. But I still feel really happy with the like impact we've been able to make for it was over 10,000 people that joined, and thousands that successfully got out of debt and started investing. And the majority were like women of color. I think it was like 60% were women of color that were looking for answers. Like, what do I start? I have all this money in cash. Like, what do I start investing in? Or I'm making like 150K a year, but I'm still in debt. Like, how do I get out of this cycle? And really helping people dig themselves out of that was like very, very exciting for like the whole team. And so we really poured our whole heart into it. And that's why it was really, really challenging to shut down. But again, to your point, I knew it wasn't like, I wasn't being my best self in that, being like resource restrained. So I knew the right decision was to shut it down and rebuild it, like my own, because I put my own finances into it as well. And so I had to rebuild my own finances as part of that too for a bit. So I went back to consulting a little bit, and then it was interesting because at one of my consulting sessions that came in, like a paid consult that came in from like LinkedIn, they actually let me know that a lot of factories were asking about me. And that was shocked me, because I hadn't thought about manufacturing in years and had been out of the game for over 6 years. And, but so to think that these factories are asking about me was really exciting. And so I started looking into it, and I was like, I think that this problem still hasn't been solved, obviously. And I think I can do it a lot better now. And especially with AI and with like all of the fintech that I know. Funny enough, fintech was the biggest piece of the puzzle that I needed to solve to make that business like very like much, to really scale in terms of revenue growth. And so I just that's when, the Nearshore idea started germinating, and started looking into, how exactly I wanted to build this and what I wanted to do next. And if I really wanted to like go into this again, because it was, it was like, I think I would say I definitely had like trauma from both of those experiences that I had to process, and like using professionals and everything. This is like a real thing. And so I knew that for this company, I wanted to start it with a different perspective. I didn't want to self-sacrifice in the way that I did in the past. I don't think that was necessary. And I also wanted to have a more balanced life where I have a regulated nervous system. I have a soft life. I like enjoy the people that I'm working with. You know, and then I trust all of them. And then they, just doing it right, doing it my way. So I really thought hard before starting this business this third time, because it's a big commitment. And I know myself, like once I commit to something, I just need to see it through. And so before really committing to it, I set my own boundaries for myself, in what I was willing to do to make this happen and what I wasn't willing to do. And for me, that gave me that security to start again. And I'm so happy I did, because it's working out. So yeah. So thank you for the space to share this too. I don't often share about a lot of this.
Yeah, no, of course. And let me just say that I'm really happy that you're doing this as well. And I think what's beautiful about what you just shared is that it is a constant reinvention, right? Like you could have kind of just been like, all right, I'm leaving my first company. I don't want to do anything. And then you kind of would have been like, you could have also been like, all right, my second company is not working out because of, the ability for me to attract the resources I needed to really build, like, could you say built it for scale? It's like you could have been like, all right, I'm done, like I'm finished, but you just like are continuously reinventing, right? And I think that, in a world where we are living in a space where a lot of folks don't know how to choose themselves, and choose their ideas and bet on themselves. Like things like this can actually be interpreted as personal failures. And I think what you have mastered, that I wish everyone masters, is like, regardless of how something ends, you can still choose to have a winning ending. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like you don't have to be the loser in your own story. And I love that you are going back to your own, initial aspirations around manufacturing and wanting to solve that problem. Because one, let me say, when I was living in LA, I was trying to start a plus size athleisure company. Everyone's like, Jessica, just do like they were always just like, Jessica, just do like drop shipping. And I was like, I don't want to do drop shipping. Like, I want to touch up the
right.
I wanted to be good. And so manufacturing was the thing that stood in my way. So when I found out, that you were doing this, it got me back to that initial idea that I had a few years ago. And I'm like, yes, manufacturing is such a interesting space. I think when people think about manufacturers, they think like old school, they think like, non-techie, they think like, blue collar, but like in so many ways, because of that, there's so much opportunity in this industry. So tell me a little bit about like what are you doing with Nearshore, and how are you using AI to disrupt, these really, like, I guess you can say like old industries. And how do you find that like they have an appetite for this stuff? Because I do believe that they do have an appetite for this stuff. If you build tools, like they will adopt them.
So that's a really, really good question. So let me share what I'm doing first. So essentially we have a platform that is the most efficient way to connect with the supplier. So and to get a quote and to actually set business terms and get, make payments. Like I mentioned, it used to take months to find a factory. So we spent months creating and curating the top suppliers in the country, doing a verification. We have a verification process, and then we just added a vetting process as well, where we go a step further into vetting a supplier. And so we did a lot of that heavy lifting first, because in a marketplace model, I knew that I needed the supplier buy-in first. So I reached out to the suppliers that were asking about me. And I was like, hey, I'm back, baby. And I shared the idea that I'm we're utilizing well, first, I couldn't come in too hot with the AI because I knew that would scare them away a little bit. So what I started to do first was I brought them business, which is like the best way to build trust, right? So I was like, look, I have this new business, and we already have some clients that are looking for your, factory skill set. Would love to connect you and bring you onto the platform. So that was like one of the first ways that I got the first few suppliers on. Once they were on, then we started talking about the AI. And so with the AI, what we're doing is we're essentially automating the coding process for them, which takes days. So typically you message them and they email you back with all of these questions on what they need to quote. And then it's this whole back and forth that takes like weeks and months just over email or over phone calls. And they were just, both sides are overcomplicating things. So essentially what I proposed to them was a more simplified version of quoting, and we're taking their data using AI to simplify it so that they can actually quote, instantly for some products, and for other products it'll just take them a day or two, or they need a little bit more information to do it versus the old process before. And so the other big thing that I noticed was that a lot of bigger suppliers were, the owners themselves were managing sales. So we're essentially their outsourced sales team. And that's how I positioned it. And it is truly like that, where we are going out and getting, leads for them. We're qualifying them for them. And then we're helping them also improve their quoting process. So that's a big behind the scenes of what we're doing with Nearshore. When you look at the front page, we just launched this yesterday, or the day before yesterday, where as a brand, you can submit a free RFQ, which is a request for quote. We use AI to guide the process and to also enhance the RFQ based on what you shared. And then you can submit within like a minute or two. So if you have that line, that athleisure line idea, you can submit an RFQ, and then our team will, we have some automatic matching. And in the meantime, we're also doing some like curation of that as well to improve the algorithm and to make sure that it's working really well. So we have a human in the loop as well as AI that like speeds things up. But essentially it's the most efficient way to build products near shore and like closer to home. So we're focused on the US, Latin America, and Europe, because that's where a big part of the need was. And we also just launched payments, so you can actually pay through the platform securely. And we're also in a bit, we'll be launching escrow services. So that way it's really safe for both sides to interact and to make payments through the platform, which was a big unlock for us to just increase security all around.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? First of all, I think this is so cool, right? Because I think like what the process just seems like what you've built in many ways feels simple in terms of like you just need to get numbers to people. And how do you do that in an expedient way? And so the problem of them having to go back and forth and ask you all these questions, right? Like I think about like insurance companies, for example, right? Like where you're trying to get a quote online, how they've mastered that. So the fact that in this industry, they have not yet mastered it, and that's the problem you're solving. I'm just like, that is so interesting. And I also think this is very like disruptive and really like helpful to this industry, because I can't imagine that they enjoy the back and forth of like asking these questions, getting it via email, crunching the numbers, right? And so
we're all suffering. Yeah, we were all suffering.
So it seems so simple in nature, but like the level of complexity associated with the back and forth, I think is what you're actually solving for. Yeah. And the fact that you were smart enough to say, like, I think AI can be the thing that, turns them off. Let me actually start with, bringing them business first is such a really good business strategy to build trust in the process. And so the question I have for you is like, when you think about, manufacturing and just logistics in general, it can be slow to change. And, you've been in the manufacturing game for a minute. Obviously you took that little bit of a break, but you've been in it for a minute. You have a wealth of knowledge. What are you finding are the biggest challenges with manufacturing in introducing technology to their operations?
And I think going back to like seeing like it's interesting because you're right. I didn't see it as a failure. I saw it as like a big learning lesson. But that was also, I think, in retrospect, because it ended up being like the snowball experience. Both of those experiences ended up being the best things that ever happened to me. And even with Snowball, like I read books, several books on behavior change, because that's what I needed to do for the platform. And all of that behavior change knowledge I'm using for the manufacturing industry. And so with that, I really had to, for some of the factories, I had to really be direct with them, because they would say things like, oh, well, we quote in 24 hours. I was like, look, I know you do it in 24 hours, but China's doing it instantly. And so 24 hours just really isn't good enough in this economy. So we have to do it instantly. And this is how we can do it instantly. And, sometimes it takes like that level of like direct communication to really kind of get someone's light bulb to turn on and be like, you know what, I think that I'm going to try this. I'll give it a try, because I think that there is some truth to the fact that we have to compete globally. And in order to compete globally, this is what we have to do. So I think that the biggest thing I learned in behavior change is also, making sure that someone's idea receptors are on. And so when I think about that, I know that because someone has to be available to receive the idea and to agree with it in order to change their mind, but they have to have an open mind, they have to have some trust, and kind of remove that defensive stance. And a lot of that I learned from like my snowball experience, and just in like being patient and understanding that like sometimes it's not a rational decision that they're doing. It's like they're defending what they've done in the past, and like that's okay. But like I think being patient and figuring out a way to get that light bulb to turn on and to get those idea receptors on. So I think about this a lot in terms of like idea receptors. And so that was like a big shift that we had to do. And it wasn't easy, like even I even tried to go cold with some factories that I knew were bigger, and it was much more challenging to do it without that sales lead, without that like patience that I had with that. So, but in the end, it's like, it's very, very exciting to really see the wave of change in an industry that I think is core to, it's core to our economy, and a lot of people just don't see it. And I'm really excited to next week I'm actually going down to LA to film inside of some of our LA factories, to really show and interview our suppliers, and I'm making a line of sauna friendly swimsuits. So I'm going to be chatting with my suppliers there to make them and everything. And so you'll get to see a little bit behind the scenes. But yeah, I think that I forgot what the original question was, but I'm just one of the biggest takeaways for me has been just sometimes it takes a little bit of patience and if it doesn't work one way, you can't just give up and just say like, oh, okay, I guess this isn't going to work. It's more taking the stance of like, this part isn't working, so what will, and what is true in today that I can begin to make some like headway towards.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what you're describing essentially is like customer discovery. It's like knowing that, the entities that you're trying to help, they have a set of problems, and as any good entrepreneur will tell you, like in order for you to like get to product market fit, in order for you to really understand like whether or not you are solving the problem for your customer, like it does require patience, it does require listening, it does require adapting. And I think that any good entrepreneur who is really committed to like building a really amazing product will say the same thing. And so when you think about the building of a community within the manufacturing industry, do you find that manufacturers know each other, or do you feel like they're kind of like siloed in their own world? I'm curious to know how that world works, and whether or not they actually have like like consortium groups, or do they have like trade shows? Like how do they come together, if at all?
So there are trade shows, and there's some like trade groups, but I would say it's not that's different than I think community.
Mhm.
Um, you don't walk into a trade show and think like, oh, this is a community. It's very transactional there.
Mhm.
So that's a big part of our ethos, is like actually creating a community. I'm on WhatsApp with a lot of our suppliers like all the time. They're calling me, I'm calling them. And over the next few months, we'll be hosting some events. We did one event last year in Los Angeles that was really, really popular with brands and suppliers, where for the first time they're meeting people in person that they've heard about in the industry, but had never met formally in person. So I'm really, really excited to do more of that, because I think that community piece, I think, was the piece that that I got really right in my first business, my first tech business. And I'm really excited to continue that, because it's also makes work a lot more fun to have a community. And if they're also my biggest advocates, and also they're really good at catching things that aren't, if something is off on the platform, they'll text me and tell me like, hey, this isn't working. I'm like, okay, I'm on it. And I like that. I want to know the things that we can improve on to make it better. So I love having that open line of communication, and just making myself available for that sort of feedback really creates better products in the end.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that I actually I want to still talk about nearshore, but I want to also talk about your mindset around trust and community building as an entrepreneur, because I think that for example, like me, like I don't know that I would have gotten to where I'm at had I not had like a big tribe, or if I would have had like the ability to build really good relationships with people in my industry. And so when you are thinking about your own journey with this ever evolving skill set, I would say, like, what do you think is the kind of advice you would give to entrepreneurs in general who are trying to build good rapport with their customers, their clientele, in order for them to build a community of customers and clients that really trust them?
I think, I don't know. It's interesting. It's like, it was very instinctual for me, because I just like making friends, and like, I just like knowing people and like getting to know people. And I think that, um, but I do think that that's part of it, right? Like, I think that uh, not seeing it so much like a transaction, and actually seeing them as people and getting to know them. Like, one of the factory owners that I used to work with, I hadn't chatted with her since I left like 8 years ago. So I just called her and I was like, Gina. I was like, she was like, oh my gosh, how's your dog? And she remembered, because I would always go over there with my dog, and we would, I would spend it wasn't a lot of time, but I would spend like 10 minutes just like getting to know her, and who she was, what her background was, and letting her get to know me as well, letting her meet my dog. And that sort of relationship, I think, goes a long way, because now she feels really comfortable saying, Tanya, I can't do that, or Tanya, I'm never going to do this, or I can do it if you do it this way. And also, it is more satisfying to just have, connections in the industry that you genuinely enjoy to be around. And so I think that seeing it less transactional is a big part of it. And um, I think also, I don't, it's funny, I don't have, it's really difficult for me to wear masks in a sense. So it's really hard for me actually to like be anyone else right now. So, but I think that like, as much as you can, just like being yourself in every situation helps a lot too. And getting comfortable with yourself in that. And yeah, and I think that those two pieces are helpful. And I think, recently with COVID, I started doing a lot of video calls, and I found myself not having that same connection. So now I'm really making an effort to see people in person as well, because I do think that in-person connection is something a little bit more. You just feel someone a little bit more, they can feel you a little bit more. And yeah, and I think that's the other piece that I'll add, is like prioritizing in person it's still a thing. So and it's still something that I think can materially change how people interact with you.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so important to share, Tanya, because I do believe that, transactional relationships, like they don't feel good. Like I remember a few years ago, there was someone who was applying to be a board member at AOT. Ultimately, due to their own capacity, they didn't move forward because they realized that it was a big commitment. But when I realized that the application for their candidacy didn't go through, I remembered having met with the person and then realizing they never applied. And I remember being like, hey, can you jump on a call? And the person was like, that moment really mattered. Like it actually made me feel good that you remembered that we met and that you remembered my interest. And you did, when you didn't see my name on the
Mm.
sheet, reached out to me to figure out what happened. And I that's just how I operate, right? Like I mean, I didn't realize like that it would mean so much to the person, but I realized that it really mattered. But and I also think what it did, it was it instilled trust that what I'm looking for in the ways in which I'm building and designing my own business is around like ethical practices and in good relationship building, because at the end of the day that is what you have. Like it's
Mhm.
not just about the P&L. I mean, the
Yep.
P&L matters when you have investors who are looking for a return, right? But at the end of the day, like when we all die, because we will, like what we leave with us are the memories and the interactions that we have with people. And I think that I want folks to know that when you're building things, like relationships matter. You can't make people feel like they're being extracted from. And so
Mm.
for sharing. And then I guess I have some other questions around like just entrepreneurship in general, because you've been doing entrepreneurship for a while and you have started 3 companies at this point. And Nearshore, I believe, is the company that, in my mind is like very relevant to the times because it's using AI and is using all these technologies that are like in the media now. What do you hope are like the things that you are able to leave behind? If you think about nearshore 10 years from now, right? And granted, like I know it's so early, but when you think about it
No,
10,
I think about this all the time. Yeah.
what would you say is like the impact that you want to leave on manufacturing, but also the impact that you want to leave as the leader of this company from a morale standpoint, a leadership standpoint, and a legacy standpoint?
Yeah, and I think going back to when I started Nearshore, I also continued to read. I've always read a lot of books on entrepreneurship. That's I love reading like the memoirs. I love reading all of those books. Like that's something that I continuously do, and I recommend all entrepreneurs that or people that have interest in entrepreneurship to do, because hearing those like raw stories really gives you perspective of the journey. But one of the companies that has been a big inspiration has been Patagonia and his model of leadership. And so I that's the culture that we've been developing, and our own flavor of it, right, where it's inclusive, we have a term like creative courage, where we share things early and often, truth seeking, where we make sure that we're facing the truth in every situation. And so there's a bunch of other ones that I should share at some point in a blog post. But that's in terms of the culture that we're building, and in terms of the actual impact. As Nearshore grows, what I'm imagining is that local suppliers get strengthened with more orders, and in general, the industry is moving towards more small batch production. So smaller, smaller MOQs, faster turnaround times, and reduced waste, so that businesses are actually selling what they're making what they're selling, because about 30% of brands throw away inventory, and it's destroyed, and that's all margin, right? So I think that the days of just creating a million things and praying that people will purchase it are kind of over. And I think that brands are getting a lot smarter about doing more regional manufacturing, doing a little bit more testing of the market first, and then continuing to scale up on the products and double down on the products that are selling. So I'm imagining that world. And then also I think that I'm also imagining, similar to you, where like people have ideas on things to make, but they have no idea how to make it. Making it overseas feels really intimidating, and it is a high cost to do. I'm imagining unlocking a lot of entrepreneurs that have, even yesterday, it was funny, I just met this videographer that I may work with for the videos next week. And he pulled up his iPhone of all of these sketches he had to create a clothing line years ago, but hasn't been able to find a factory. And now he's going to obviously look on Nearshore. So I think that I'm imagining a big unlock for a lot of people that have always been curious, why not just like do a small run of XYZ line. I'm also doing a jewelry line with like birds because I'm a birder. So I think that I'm imagining both sides just like being a little bit more unlocked. And in general, the factories in the US and Latin America, it ranges from like a super small shop to like some of the largest factories that are producing for some of the largest brands. But I'm imagining also, and this also happened when I started my first tech business, factories starting out because of Nearshore, because there's an opportunity now, and there's like demand, and there's like proven demand, and a place to get business quickly. So I'm also imagining that. I think that this has been really, really exciting to see. And my hope is that it also helps with climate, because I think that, climate is a big part of the conversation as well, where all of the waste in the clothing waste is huge. And also, just getting the products over here from China is a huge, it produces a lot of waste for our environment and for our oceans. And I'm really eager to stop some of that waste that's going on. And so I think that that's another, I think, side effect that I'm excited about, but you got to take it one step at a time.
Yeah. Oh, but this is such a beautiful vision, Tanya, because it's like a win for the manufacturers, because they get a tool that really helps streamline a lot of their operations. It's a win for the creator who wants to build, some kind of company that requires them to get product that is manufactured. It's also a win for countries and society, because if we're able to solve the issue around like waste, and like the number that you said that really jumped out at me just now is like 30% of product goes to the trash. Like I'm just like, that really sucks. And then it got me thinking about some of the TikTok videos I've seen about like people dumpster diving. Like they'll go to like, really big box retailers, and they'll just go through the dumpster and they'll find like Dyson hair wraps. They'll find like these like fully made products just there. And I'm just like, you know what? It got me thinking a little bit about a conversation I had with my friend Sherelle Dorsey. She used to run a company called The Plug, and she's now in the climate world. And I'm just like, wow, this is such a big problem. And so your vision, it just seems like a win all around. And I'm curious to know, around the topic of vision, like when you think about a good entrepreneur, right? Because now being on your third company, like where do you think entrepreneurs get vision from? And how do you keep your vision going when things get hard? Because it does get hard to just continue to go in a world that's always changing and is loud, and the external environment just feels so full of pressure.
I don't think I've been asked that question. Where do you, I think I need a minute to think about that.
Hi.
Yeah, I think that, I can speak for myself personally. Where it comes for me is, I think that part of it is like a spiritual experience for me in that, and like the act of creating feels like a spiritual experience for me. And in terms of where it comes from, I meditate a lot. I meditate for at least an hour a day. And well, sometimes it'll be 10 minutes on rough days. But I'm on today's like day 333 on my streak on Insight Timer. That's an app I use for meditating. But I think that I also, going back to community and connection, I get a lot of my vision from like talking and listening. I listen. And I think that to create a good product, you have to listen in a way that's a slightly detached from your own reality, because you kind of have to immerse yourself in that other person's reality for a second. And so I think that I really, this time around too, I really focused in on listening to our suppliers. And I also do this thing, if there's like a really upset customer, I'll call them myself and I want to listen. And I was like, the worst one, send them to me. I'm okay with it. Cause like, I'll get on the phone and I'll just listen and I'll hear them out and hear their perspective. And I think that is really, really helpful. So I think that, I don't know if that's exactly the right answer, but that's been my experience, at least from on my end. Yeah. But I don't know if there's like good or bad entrepreneurs, actually. I think that entrepreneurship itself is just a journey of creation. And so I don't want to place judgment on like anything that's good or bad. And I think the most important thing is to see it all as part of the experience and as a learning, because truly each of these experiences has, allowed me to grow in ways that I would not have been able to working if I had stayed at Goldman. Maybe that would have been a different growth journey, but like even one of my co-founders was my angel investor. He was like the last angel investor that came in for my last company. So it's, it's all been kind of building on itself. And I think if you see it in that way and take a less I also, I think that often, like in culture in general, there's been this culture of kind of like shame and blame or something like that. And I think I really focused on letting a lot of that go, a lot of those judgments, because as soon as you let those judgments let go of yourself, it's easier for other people to let go of them too, for themselves and the ones that they have for you as well. So I think that, yeah. And to your point, like those judgments won't matter at the end. It'll be like the relationships and the impact that you do. And so, yeah, I think that's a little bit of my perspective on that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing. Let me just say, I'm not there yet, Tanya. I do believe that there are some bad entrepreneurs out there, only because
they're on their journey.
Only because they're so like, actually, let me take this back. Like, I think there's some unethical ones, right?
Oh, yes. Okay. That is true. This is true. This is true.
Yeah, the reframe there is like, there are people in my mind that are in leadership that are not supposed to be there. There are people that are getting funding to build products that should not. But let me just say, but what keeps me excited is that I meet people like you, right, who are phenomenal, who are trying to solve real problems, who are trying to build products that like are very, very much based in community empowerment and getting us to experience a world that doesn't currently exist. And so we don't give, these interesting folks, we'll call them. We don't give these interesting folks a platform over here at Behind the Work. But
no, that's a really good point. That is something that I have to I continue to have to like observe and understand a little bit more. But you're right. I think a lot of people often I see that sometimes people get so caught up in the ego of like wanting to accomplish XYZ thing, and they're willing to do unethical things to get there. And that's not great for the industry. It's not good for anyone really. So that's real. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But I also think your ability, right? Because I think what you're hinting at is like, regardless of where they're at in their own journeys, like there's still a way that we can center their humanity. I think I'm working on like, centering people's humanity that I think are just like pretty outrageous. So I think it says a lot about your own ability to be empathetic. and really see humans. I'm not there yet, though, and that's to go on record. So then, Tanya, like for those who are listening and they want to be building like companies like Nearshore, what advice would you give for the next generation of entrepreneurs who are looking at you, who are looking at a Latina who's raised millions, who's built 3 different companies? Like, what advice would you give them about giving themselves the opportunity to do the same?
I think so. I think that going into it, it's really important to be honest, and I will be honest that it is extremely challenging at times. You really have to face yourself in all ways, and you have to face your own truths. You have to face your habits. You have to face the discipline that you have. To will something into existence is not an easy feat. So I think that going into it with that sober mindset of like, I'm going to take on this project. And that's how I took it on in the show. I was like, I'm going to take it on. I'm going to set these boundaries. I know that there's going to be bumps in the road, and I accept that as part of the journey, and I'm going to embrace that as part of the journey. So I think that what I've learned in this is instead of, and so me and my co-founders have like a weekly reflection time where we write, kind of like riding the wave, like what we're doing to ride the wave. And I really truly see it in this way of like riding the waves that are coming towards you, because you can't kind of resist anything that's like happening, because there's going to be times where things don't go your way, and you have to face that, and you have to decide whether you want to keep going or not. And you have to set your own boundaries of like, this is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm not willing to do. But at the same time, it does feel like magic. It's extremely satisfying when something comes to life and when people are utilizing it and they're enjoying it, and it's something that didn't exist before. Like, that makes it all worth it. And I've really put in a lot of effort for it not to completely drain me of my life source, where I can continuously stay balanced and level-headed, and I can make the best decisions that I can make if I'm not in this like fight or flight mode, right? Like, it's really, really difficult to make a decision in a fight or flight mode. And so I pay special attention to the moments in which I'm doing a 10-minute meditation instead of 30 minutes, right? Or like an hour, instead of an hour, because those are the moments where I have to step back and say, like, I actually need to take care of myself in this moment. And so I think that my advice overall is, I think that betting on yourself feels really exciting. It also, I think, is a complete journey in self-discovery as well. And I think it's in the end, it can be worth it, and it can be really satisfying and exciting and fun and magical, and an experience that, not a lot of us get to have. And I think that, but also I think that, it's interesting because I never sought out to be like an entrepreneur, like a tech entrepreneur. It kind of evolved, like I mentioned, over the course of the interview. But I think I do think that detaching your identity from the work, I think, is really helpful, because when you have too much attachment to it, it causes, I think, a lot more self-destruction in general. And so I think that being slightly detached from everything and just being the observer of it, and just like seeing what the next path could be based on like the situation that's ahead of you, I think for me has been a big unlock in staying centered, and ultimately getting what I wanted, but just being a little bit patient about it, and knowing like, I don't actually have to have that conversation right now. I can cool off. I can come to it tomorrow and I can handle it in that way. And I think that I have a few rules for myself, actually. So if I never make a decision if I'm in if I'm in an emotionally charged state. I always that's a hard and fast rule for me. If it's a big decision, I always sleep on it. is another piece. And then the other piece is the other big rule is that I'm not going to like self-sacrifice to the point where I'm like not happy in the situation. Like I want to keep having fun in doing this, and I want to keep enjoying this, because I think that's what'll create a good product, is if I'm like enjoying it, not like curmudgeon-y, like, like, in a bad mood. Like no one really wants to work with anyone in a bad mood, right? So I think that I make an extra effort for those things, and I set those rules for myself. But other than that, it's like all about like enjoying it and having fun, and
Yeah.
not taking it as serious. It sometimes also helps, because sometimes I take a step back and I'm just like, I'm in a room full of people that are like very, charged and all these things. And I just kind of have to take a step back and be like, you know what, that's them. That's their anxiety, not my anxiety. And that's okay. And I can still kind of enjoy what I'm doing. So I think that a big part of my kind of spiritual practice has been creating this sort of inner fortress that is that's very difficult for people to get into, and I like that. And I think every entrepreneur needs their own inner fortress, because as an entrepreneur, people will give you so much advice. Everyone's giving you advice, everyone's giving you opinions, everyone's saying something about something, and you have to decide. You have to see those as data points, and then you have to decide, okay, I actually agree with that, or I don't agree with that, and this is, it doesn't necessarily affect what your inner dialogue is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's I love that. Have fun, build an inner fortress, detach this from your identity. Like all of those are really, really, really great pieces of advice. And so then, Tanya, now that we're wrapping up the interview, how can our listeners support you, Nearshore, and everything you're doing?
Well, definitely share Nearshore with any entrepreneurs that are creating a physical product. We're in 3 main categories: apparel, jewelry and accessories, including leather, and cosmetics and formulations. So if you want to create a new shampoo line, we have factories that can do that in the US and Latin America. Same thing with all of the other categories. So yeah, definitely share it with entrepreneurs, create an RFQ if you're curious. And and I think that follow us on social media too. We're at Nearshore. And check us out at nearshore.ai.
Awesome. So, Tanya, you blessed us with so much insight today. Thank you for your honesty and your wisdom and your genius. I'm really, really happy that we had this conversation. It was so inspiring, not just for the audience, I'm sure, but for me on a personal level. And I really hope that for those of you who are listening today, you are feeling empowered to really see an opportunity for you to bet on yourself and your ideas and consistently reinvent yourself. I think that is what I got from the interview with Tanya today, is that, doing hard things and being courageous, there is beautiful things on the other side of that. And please, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow us on social media. Until next time, keep building, keep creating, and keep owning your stories. Bye. Mwah. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Behind the Work. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and follow us on social media. I'm really looking forward to seeing and hearing how this show is leaving an impact on you.